And counting the cost with abortion. Well, the cost we focus on primarily is 250,000 lives lost in England and Wales every year, and 18,000 lives lost in Scotland every year. That's the real cost that we're concerned about. And I'm not going to present myself today as some sort of great martyr of the pro-life cause, but I've had some experiences that maybe there's some things we can learn from and share together. Now, years ago, I was a teacher, a housemaster in a boys' boarding school in Edinburgh, and we had the Scotsman newspaper delivered every day. And at the end of the day, I'd often get the newspaper, I'd have a read of it, and I'd end up thinking, this is really annoying. No one's saying what I would like to say in the newspaper. No one's coming from the sort of Christian values angle. So one day I thought, all right, I've had enough of this. How do you write a letter? I wrote a letter to the newspaper and wrote more and more and more. I had hundreds of letters published. I started engaged in public debate, writing, speaking, all sorts of things. I was really feeling this was part of my calling as a Christian. The school didn't quite share that view about it, because some people would hear something I'd say, then instead of doing something ridiculous like coming and speaking to me or saying, oh, I disagree with you, can we talk about it? They'd phone up the headmaster of the school and say, how can you allow someone with these views to be teaching in your school? This is a disgrace. What are you going to do about it? Then the headmaster would call me in and he'd say, what are you going to do about it? And I'd say, well, you can tell me what to do in school, but out of school, I'm going to continue articulating what I see as the truth. Then the inspectors would come to the school. Every time the inspectors would come, they wouldn't say anything to me. But when they'd gone, the headmaster would call me in and he'd say, the inspectors are a bit concerned about your online profile. They're a bit concerned about some of the things you've been saying. And it basically headed towards the point where, well, it did get to the point where the school was saying, if you carry on saying these things, we will fire you. So I thought, right, what do I do here? I decided what I do here is say to the school, well, okay, the ball's in your court. I'm going to carry on saying these things. If you want to fire me, I'm not sure it would work out well for you, but if that's what you want to do, you do it, but you don't tell me about what I can say outside school. And a lesson I draw from that, I think this applies quite widely as well. Sometimes we get into situations where we're under pressure. Someone's got some sort of power or control over us, and there's a bit of a struggle. They're trying to influence you, they're trying to push you around, and you're thinking, oh, should I compromise? Is this the point I dig my heels in? I'm not quite sure. In fact, that phase is quite difficult. The thing that makes it much easier, I found, I think other people have found as well, is the point where you say, this is where I'm drawing the line. And that's what I did with the school. I said, I'm drawing the line here. You can tell me what to do in school. You can't tell me what to do outside school. I've got to stop my stopwatch. Right, we're off. And for me, that gave me freedom. It meant that when the next message came from the headmaster, oh, we're going to fire you, you've got to stop. For me, I was just at peace. I've made my decision. There's nothing I'm going to change. It's just up to you about how things are going to unfold. So that got worse. And eventually, the headmaster said to me, I want to check everything before you say it or write it anywhere publicly. I said, that's ridiculous, probably because you don't want to read all the thousands of words I write. So I said, how about this instead? I'll give you a list of my controversial views, and you can make your mind up whether I'm allowed to say them or not. So I gave him a list of 10 views. One of them was, abortion is immoral. And the school obviously got their lawyers on the case, and I had a reply. And the reply to every one of these 10 views was, you could be summarily dismissed for gross misconduct for stating this view. And for abortion, and for some others as well, the letter also said, this could be seen as contravening the standards of the General Teaching Council for Scotland. So you could be struck off, basically. So I got that and I thought, that's nonsense. I'm going to go and ask them. I'm going to go to the General Teaching Council of Scotland, the professional body. I'm going to ask them if this is true. Could it contravene their standards, saying that you're pro-life, basically? So I got in touch with them and they said, come in, let's have a chat about it. So I went in, I had a chat with a lady, and she said basically, yes, that could contravene our standards. You could be struck off for saying abortion's immoral. I said to her, right, thanks very much. I came in for clarity. I completely disagree with you, but I came in seeking clarity, and that's what you've given me, so that's great. I said, would you mind just putting that in writing for me, and then we know where we stand? Oh, I'd rather not do that. No, I would. So I really pressed her, and she just said, no, I'm not putting that in writing. So I contacted them later, And I said, this is not on. You can't give me a threat, a warning, and then refuse to put it on paper. This is totally wrong. And I really kept at them till eventually they did put it in writing, that saying abortion is immoral could contravene their standards. So I got this in writing, so I went to the media. And the Times and the Daily Mail published a story about it. And they each went to the General Teaching Council of Scotland and said basically, what on earth's going on here? And to one of the newspapers, throughout this, I'd said, if I say abortion's immoral, in a letter to a newspaper or in a Facebook post. That was the context of the whole discussion. So to one of the newspapers, they said, oh, we thought he meant speaking to pupils in school. And to the other newspaper, they said, we thought he meant addressing a group of parents at the school gate. I mean, absolute downright lies that they came out with. Now, I had a later case with the General Teaching Council of Scotland for saying that children need a mum and a dad ideally, where they tried to strike me off. It didn't quite work out. So that went on. But basically, my career in teaching was not going to end in retirement. It was going to end up in being fired or struck off. I decided to move on and do something else. What was that something else? Well, I was doing all this speaking, debating, writing often about moral, social issues. People started saying, you should go into politics, and I started thinking, well, maybe this is my call as well. So I think going into politics, in the light of the fact that I believe that the Scottish government, for example, through its agency, the NHS, kills tens of thousands of unborn children every year. So in the light of that, how should I engage in politics? And to cut a long story short, I thought starting a new party was the way to go. And one of the fundamentals of this new party would be clearly pro-life. So the Scottish Family Party was born. Part of our strategy is in Scotland, small parties have got a bit more of a chance because of a slightly different electoral system. But what really drove us in particular was what I came to understand about what's required of me as someone with pro-life views entering into politics. Now, I'm going to explain my reasoning here, which you may not disagree with. I'm not God. I'm not giving you another book from the Bible here. So you may or may not agree with me, but this is the reasoning I've been through and the conclusions I came to. So imagine you were in a nation that's a democracy, and there are two parties in this democracy. There's Party A and there's Party B, and that's it. There are no other parties. And election time's coming up. There's a significant Hindu minority in your nation, and Party A say they're going to round up all the Hindus and they're going to kill them all. Party B says they're going to round up all the Hindus, they're going to kill half of them and keep the other half of them in work camps. Okay, right, it's election day. Who are you going to vote for? Now, a lot of people, first of all, their first reaction is, well, obviously Party B. They're not as bad. It's not going to be so bad voting for Party B. And then they think about it and think, well, actually, not quite so sure. If you vote for Party B, people will look at the results. They'll say, everyone who voted in this election, all these people, they all support at least killing half the Hindus, don't they? That's what your vote would be interpreted as. When you put your cross there, you're saying, even if you don't agree with killing that many Hindus, you're still saying, this is not a red line issue for me. You know, I'll still vote for you in any case. This is a bit of a side issue. I'll still express my support. So that if you're in that democracy, Party A and Party B, what do you do? Well, I would say you start Party C. You can't vote until there's Party C that says, actually, no, we don't want to kill any Hindus. We don't want to round them up. We don't want any of that. And that's the way forward. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the only way forward with a clear conscience. Now, another way I put this in my book that's been mentioned is I think voting for a party that's not pro-life, in other words, that will continue the mass killing of the unborn, if people want to argue that it's okay to vote or join or support or represent such a party, I say just try this exercise. Stand in front of the mirror, look at yourself in the mirror, and say, I voted for a party that would continue the mass killing of the unborn because I like their policies on immigration. Or I voted for a party that would continue the mass killing of the unborn because they're the ones who had the best chance of beating Labour in my constituency. I voted for a party that will continue the mass killing of the unborn because I think they're the ones that have got the best policy on climate change. As far as I'm concerned, the sentence, I voted for a party that will continue the mass killing of the unborn because, as far as I'm concerned, there's no way of finishing off that sentence that doesn't cross a red line for my conscience. That's the conclusion I came for. I made the same point recently in a video. The Scottish Parliament is next to Arthur's Seat, a big escarpment, rocky escarpment next to the Parliament. And I went up on it, basically to drawing analogies with the temptation of Jesus and saying, see that Parliament there? If you feel that God's calling you into politics, you should be a member of the Scottish Parliament. Imagine the power you'd have. Imagine that £72,000 a year. Imagine the way that Christians would be hanging on your every word. You'd be invited to Christian events. You'd become a celebrity on the Christian circuit. I mean, think about the good and influence you could exert if you were a member of the Scottish Parliament. There's just one little compromise you need to make in order to get elected. You just need to join a party that will continue the mass killing of the unborn. And that is the offer from all the parties in the Scottish Parliament at the moment. And for me, when I thought this through, my conclusion was, well, that's not a compromise I can make. Now, some political parties, they say abortion's a matter of conscience. It's a matter of conscience, therefore we don't have a policy about it. I just cannot understand that. It's like saying this issue is a fundamental matter of right and wrong. It's a matter of listening to our conscience. And because it's a fundamental matter of right and wrong, we don't have a policy. We don't care what you think. You can take whatever view you like. So I think a party that's not pro-life is pro-abortion, because abortion is currently happening, and it will continue to happen until a government says, right, we're going to stop it. Now, in saying it's a matter of conscience, what parties can achieve is to keep pro-life people on board. They're saying, basically, you can be in our party. You can vote for us. Please vote for us. We're okay. We'll let you be in our party, but we're not going to actually put your views into practice. And for bigger parties, if you want 40% of the vote, what's it going to do if you say you're pro-life? I mean, you're done for, aren't you? I mean, you're not going to get 40% of the vote. So for big parties, it will be strategic suicide to become pro-life. Whereas for us, we make it our primary policy because that's a matter of conscience. It's a red line. Now, of course, other people say you can join the other parties, you can influence them from within. But I think as soon as you join a party, you endorse it. Even if you don't like the party's policies in some ways, you endorse it by saying that you're in it and by standing for that party. And as I've explained, I think that's a red line. Now, lots of Christians will say you can be a Christian in any party. Christians can vote for any party. And I always think to that, I would absolutely agree if we were 60 years ago. If this was 1955, I would be absolutely agreeing. But now I don't. So that's my reasoning that's brought me to the point of, instead of joining one of the bigger political parties in Scotland, that we started something new. So what cost has that involved? Well, it's a hard road, starting a new political party. There's something like 300 political parties registered in the UK, which illustrates there's an awful lot of parties that actually don't get anywhere. So it's a very hard road to go along. And as a party as well, we have the experience. We can present some policies to people, and people say, oh, I really like that, that's great. But then they hear that you're pro-life, it's, oh, all right, not so keen on that bit. So we know that we're limiting our appeal in some ways, limiting our chances by sticking to our principles. Because we're pro-life, we're demonized in the media. And that can be quite difficult sometimes, because I'm a sort of okay-ish person, I think, sort of. But seeing yourself portrayed in the media when they're trying to paint you as someone who's really appalling, says the most horrible things, it's quite it's a surreal experience to be represented in a way that's so divorced from reality. But that's part of the price that we pay. I think within the church, as well, speaking more broadly, I think there's a significant number of Christians who regard the Scottish Family Party as a bit of an embarrassment to the church. We really wish you wouldn't do these things. We really wish you wouldn't bring these issues up. We don't want to bring them up in the church. And if you go and bring them up outside the church, It's like gives the game away, and people start working out what the church believes, and what a disaster that would be. So we get a bit of a cold shoulder from some corners there. And meanwhile, while we're going along, and we've got a lot of supporters as well. We've got a lot of enthusiastic supporters, and we're making progress. But also we see other politicians who join the mainstream parties who are Christians, but are not pro-life. You've probably heard of Kate Forbes, a very prominent Christian in the parliament. She speaks at all sorts of major Christian events around the country. I mean, she's promised to maintain access to abortion. So she's pro-abortion. There's other Christian politicians in the Scottish Parliament as well. They are pro-abortion, but it seems like as far as the church is concerned, in general, it doesn't matter. Makes no difference. That they're held up, that they're given a platform, and generally people don't even know that they're pro-abortion. An interesting contrast to that is Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump said lots of pro-life things. What he really believes, I'm not quite sure, but that's not the point. But my point is, a few months ago, Donald Trump said something that was pretty pro-abortion. And I think some people were surprised he said it. And the pro-life activists in America absolutely savaged him. They turned on him and said, "You can forget it, Trump. We're not supporting you anymore. If you go around saying things like that, you're done for." And so Trump was bullied into retracting it and saying something a bit more pro-life instead. Now, bullying Donald Trump into something is pretty impressive, isn't it? But I think in Britain, we get totally the opposite. If you're a Christian, I'm a Christian politician. Oh, that's wonderful. That's what we need. We need Christians in politics. And I'm in favor of killing unborn children. Oh, never mind, that doesn't matter. It's just so wonderful we've got a Christian in politics. That's the situation we're in this country. The day before yesterday, I went to the National Prayer Breakfast in Scotland. Big, posh event, lots of politicians there, Christian leaders from various contexts. Life is never mentioned, not a mention. So there was a question time. So I asked them, they've been talking about justice and human rights and responsibility and seeing Jesus in people. And so I went through all those things and said, do these apply to the unborn? So a panel of 4 people, one of them was a politician. He said, he basically was he didn't like abortion, but he wasn't going to try and change the law. Another one spoke, and basically she wasn't pro-life. She was pro-abortion. And the other 2 speakers, one of them was Pete Gregg, who I understand is a very popular speaker figure. They passed the mic, wouldn't say anything on the topic. So that's the situation I find myself. We feel like we're on the sidelines, as probably often you do yourselves, while pro-abortion Christian politicians are in the limelight. But the other thing we have as well is there's a massive movement within pro-life Christian circles in general. That when you talk about politics, is the obvious thing to do is you write to your MP, you write to your MSP. So we can elect whoever we like. We don't need to worry about who we elect. But once they get elected, we can steer the ship if we send enough emails and go and meet them, which I think basically doesn't work out. I mean, how many politicians have a total worldview transplant on the basis of contact from constituents? And basically it doesn't happen. Ultimately, you've got to put people into the parliament who share the values, rather than putting people who in some cases literally hate our values, and then expecting that this problem can be sorted out later on. So the Scottish Family Party, where are we? Our highest percentage in an election so far is 3.5%. We can normally guarantee wherever we stand, we'll get about 1%. You can get an MSP elected with 6 or 7% in a region. So we've got a long way to go. We've got a long way to go, but we're in this for the long term. But then what we've learned in politics, though, you can have what policies you like. Sometimes people say, "Oh, make this your policy. That would really get you lots of votes." And we think, no, it won't, because policies make no difference. Okay, people vote for parties for all sorts of strange reasons. Virtually no one reads manifestos or looks at policies. So a lot of that's totally outside our hands. But what we need is people who will look at the policies. So people will think, all right, Scottish Family Party, pro-life, that's key, I'm voting for them. They're the people that we really need. We don't need people so much who think, I've never seen him on the telly. He mustn't be a proper politician. Scottish Family Party, I've hardly heard of them. They haven't got any MSPs now. What's the point of them? So that sort of thinking is against us. So what we need people who are just going to be absolutely principled and will just find out the key fact. So they might only need to hear it once. Scottish Family Party, protect the unborn, they're the ones for me. And there's people out there, and we're hoping that that number is going to grow and grow. Now, part of what we're doing is to try and influence public opinion. In a democracy, the way the country's run is not going to be too far out of kilter with public opinion. So we use the political arena to put forward a pro-life message. For example, our party election broadcast last year was my wife talking about her abortion and experiences of the consequences of that. Quite similar to Tricia's testimony in some ways. So we managed to get that on the BBC and STV as a party election broadcast, but which we think that's well worth doing. No matter how many votes you get, we're doing something really meaningful with that. Right, I'll mention a couple of other things we've done as well. We've had 18,000 fairy lights. We bought 18,000 fairy lights, white ones, and we lay them out as a carpet, as a memorial to the unborn lives lost within the last year in Scotland. So we've done that in different parts of Scotland. An increasingly fierce response, a few eggs thrown and placards stolen, and some people just like shaking with rage, even though with this very quiet, gentle activity. And one of the times we did this in Aberdeen, it happened to be within a buffer zone. We didn't do it on purpose, but it was within a buffer zone. But the clinic was closed. And in Scotland, the buffer zone law doesn't apply when a clinic's closed. But the media seemed to think it did. So there was a media campaign against us. Gillian Mackay, who introduced the law, she said, why are the police not arresting these people? She didn't understand her own law. So you've got a politician urging the police to arrest us, and we're not actually breaking the law. So we thought, right, this is getting a bit of publicity. Let's do it again. So I phoned the police up and said, right, well, we're going to do this again. We're going to do this in Edinburgh. And the police officer said, we'll arrest you. I said, well, we're not breaking the law. And the police officer said, quote, I'm just telling you what they told me to tell you. So I said, well, we're all going to do it. He said, well, you'll have to take your chances in the courts. We're going to arrest you. So we went ahead and did it. The police didn't turn up. Then we did it yet again. When we did it again, there were some online forums of people discussing what they were going to do to us. And it was not nice. What they were going to pour over us, throw at us, do to us. It was quite sinister stuff. So I sent it to the police and said, I think actually it might be helpful if you send someone along for this. I think there's a significant risk that this is going to turn nasty. And when we turned up on the day, there was a group on the other side, and they looked a pretty rum bunch. So I phoned the police and said, right, nothing's happened yet, but it is looking quite threatening. I think it might be a good idea if you came along. No reply. Wouldn't come. Because if they had turned up, they'd have had an MSP complaining in the media, why didn't you arrest these people? So it's not just the police were threatening to arrest us, they were refusing to protect us from a genuine threat. It was quite an eye-opener. Right, moving on from our Scottish Family Party things. My wife runs the 40 Days for Life vigil in Edinburgh. Now, talking about counting the cost, I'm sure many of you have been, obviously, the CBR displays have the same sort of responses. So you get things thrown at you, spat at, all sorts of abuse. And again, the fascinating thing is to see the parallel narrative, fantasy narrative that's built up in the media and the parliament. You know what the vigils are like, don't you? Just a handful of people standing praying, maybe with a placard saying, ask me about my abortion, for example. And one of the MSPs in the parliament, she said, these vigils are violently preventing women accessing healthcare. So Mary wrote to her and said, that's not true. Would you retract that? And this MSP replied saying, I'm going to stick to my principles. I'm not compromising on my principles. I'm not retracting it. I mean, where'd you go with that? We had another MSP saying, these vigils are molesting women. I mean, there was a story where they concocted once that a pro-lifer had driven a car into someone. It was actually a pro-abortion protester, and what she was doing was walking out in front of cars, making them stop, and trying to put a leaflet under their windscreen wiper. So she did that to a car. The car stopped, so she leaned over, tried to put this thing in. And it ends up a story in the newspaper the next day, pro-life activists drive car at counter-protesters. I mean, it really is frightening to see how much they can manipulate the narrative. The other with 40 Days for Life, you can mention it to some Christians, and some Christians think, I'm just a bit wiser than that. I'm more the sort of person who sits down with people and talks through their issues and really explore them together and build a relationship. That's the sort of Christian I am. Not your sort who goes out and does that sort of thing. But what do they think happens at these vigils? Endless conversations. People then opening up about the most personal aspects of their life, about their history, and really wonderful pastoral conversations on the street. And I think if only people could understand that. Now, the vigils, of course, save lives. Women going to have an abortion and then change their minds, and our life is saved. Now, you might have seen the arrest of Rose Doherty in Glasgow. Rose has run the vigil there for decades. When the law came in, she decided she was going to break the law. And so she went along with a placard saying, "Coercion is illegal. Talk to me only if you want to." And I went along with her to film. And the police came one time and they said, "Right, you're breaking the law. Do you understand the law? We'll give you a while to think about it. Then we're coming back if you haven't gone." And so they would go to the other side of the road, and then it would time out. We'd all get bored waiting. So we'd go home. And it actually took 3 or 4 attempts before the police actually arrested her. One time there were 8 police officers on the scene for this 74-year-old grandmother with her one placard. But eventually, sorry? Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, full of violence. And they put handcuffs on. Now, I was filming. I was going to make sure I got that picture of the handcuffs going on. I mean, how ridiculous, putting handcuffs on a lady in those circumstances. And I have to say, standing there filming that, I found it quite moving, quite shocking to have someone that I know and have worked with, and I know a fellow pro-life activist, being arrested, put in handcuffs, and taken away in a police car. That's not a moment that I will ever forget, and that's something that I think has had quite a powerful effect on me as well. Because the big picture here is you've got people like Rose trying to save lives, and they're criminalized. In the hospital, the people who are taking lives are on the NHS payroll, and that's the state that we're in. Now, to talk a bit more about the counting the cost, experience within the church and within Christians. Oh, this is generalizations, and there's a huge variety. But my wife and I, we sometimes talk about the veil of silence with Christians. "Oh, how was your weekend? What were you doing?" "Oh yeah, we went out on the CBR display." "Oh, right. Well, lovely day today. Just we've got to get off that topic." Same with the family party. If you meet someone new, "Oh, what do you do?" "Oh, I'm a doctor." "Okay, that's nice." "What do you do?" "Oh, I work for the family party." "Oh, right. Okay. Let's just get on to another topic as soon as possible." That's not everyone, but it happens quite a lot. It happens quite a lot. We heard church leadership mentioned earlier on, but I think a lot of Christians just don't know what to make of it. They don't know if they're supposed to be on your side if you're a pro-life activist. It's just this is something weird they haven't really thought about before. And I think for us, it can be quite difficult, because the church is supposed to be the place where you're built up and supported in your ministry. Okay, the tough experience is supposed to be out there, but sometimes it can be a bit hurtful within the church as well. I've been learning recently, I used to think some Christians, okay, they're pro-life, but they might think it's a bit insensitive or whatever to actually speak about it, so they think the church shouldn't really speak about it. I've been realizing more and more recently, these people are not actually pro-life. When you actually pin them down, they are not actually pro-life. And that's something that I've been learning, say, particularly in recent weeks. At my church, the vigil came up in discussion once with a group of people, and someone said, "Oh, we need to be careful we don't become like those people in America blowing up clinics, don't we?" I mean, the UK is a hotbed of apathy when it comes to the pro-life movement. But some Christians think the danger we're in is we've got these firebrand extremists who are just ready to throw a bomb at anything. So we really need to cool things down here and just moderate things a little bit. Which is just bizarre. The thing within churches is there's this general pastoral assumption. Whatever issue you raise, the immediate thought is, how would I deal with the person who walked through the door and had an issue with this? Which is absolutely valid. Quite right. If you're a pastor, if you're any Christian, that's what you've got to think. You've got to deal with people, support them, help them, share the gospel, accept them, absolutely. But I think for many Christians, they can't see beyond that. So when it comes to the abortion issue, these women are in a difficult position. How can we support these women? What can we do? but there's no thought of the unborn child. Because the unborn child doesn't walk through the church, the door of the church, and we don't have to think about how we tackle the unborn child. Again, I think that's something that hopefully through the work of CBR and others, more Christians can understand. I would say, me Christians as well, they'll say, oh yeah, abortion, very bad, I'm pro-life, but I don't want to make it illegal. That's just a step too far. That's not really practical. And I just think you're not pro-life. You are not pro-life if you say, oh, it's fine for it to stay legal. It's like saying slavery, treating people as property. This is just appalling. I cannot believe this goes on. No, I don't want to make it illegal.
And I guess it's interesting to get to talk to a lot of people in churches that they do have that attitude. Another very of that attitude around churches is that God's standards are repulsive. God's truth is repulsive. If the church articulates God's teaching, God's moral standards on issues, that will put people off, and they'll never come again. And it will just be the worst possible thing to do. Whereas I see the opposite. I see God's truth and wisdom as a wonderful thing to protect us, to build a positive, healthy, flourishing society. So I see the complete opposite. But I think a lot of churches see it as an embarrassment, and they genuinely believe that if people speak about these things, it's going to put people off coming to the Carol service. That's basically, But there's completely the opposite. People are curious. People want truth. People are looking for some solid ground to stand on. So hopefully the tide is turning on that as well. But there's another word that sends a shiver down my spine. Is winsome. Now, winsome, fine. It's got its meaning. I absolutely understand what it means. But I think in the Christian dictionary, it often means you should only talk about things that are nice and fluffy. And you shouldn't challenge anyone about anything. Otherwise, you're not being winsome. And as I mentioned it as well, I call it the cult of niceness in the church. Like there's various issues of various importance, but whatever they are, above them is going to be nice. So unborn children being killed, okay, fair enough. Okay, that's an important issue, but above that goes, we've got to be seen to be nice. We've got to be, showing that sort of soft exterior. I think the other thing I would say, I've had this conversation with quite a few church leaders. I said, I couldn't mention abortion. And that would be really insensitive. People in my congregation, who knows what their stories are? This could be really difficult. And I would say to them, no, it's not really difficult. It's really easy. You're a preacher of the Christian gospel. So whatever issue you're bringing, where does it need to? It leads to forgiveness and grace and restoration. And you're saying you can't talk about it because you think it's going to be insensitive. So you've got people in your congregation who need to hear this message, but you're worried that you haven't got the resources in the Christian gospel to address this issue. And I said to them, believe in yourself. You can do it. You can present this. But I haven't got any successes to chalk up after this conversation. Yes. Other areas where there might be a cost, family. Now, in the Scottish Family Party, I could tell you a number of stories that would break your heart about the way family members have reacted to people being involved in the family party or being involved in pro-life activism. Basically, you get family members who will just issue ultimatums, saying, you must stop being involved in this work, you must stop being involved in CBR, you must stop being involved in the family party, or we don't want to see you anymore. Or in one case even, a grandfather, daughter said to him, if you don't stop this sort of activity, we're not going to allow you to see your grandchildren. That is the current state of play. I see so many stories like this. It's really appalling. I think on these issues, and I go back to what I said at the beginning about drawing the line. I think if a family member feels there's something to play for, like if I'm angry enough, if I'm threatening enough, maybe they'll stop. So I'll try even harder to see if I can pressurize them into stopping. If they feel that it's game on, it's all to play for, then maybe they'll keep doing this. But I think maybe if the person says, I'm not going to stop doing this, this is my church, this is what's important to me, I'm going to continue to do this, and I hope we can have a positive relationship regardless. And then once that line's being drawn, sometimes the other person thinks, it's not going to work. I don't need to try harder to be threatening and cold and distancing and whatever. I think in some cases that can be helpful. But there can be a price to pay with family, socially as well. I mean, one of my experiences when I was teaching, there was a number of other teachers, they weren't my best mates, but worked with them, got on with them full-time. When I had my case with the General Teaching Council for Scotland, for saying that children need a mum and a dad ideally, and they didn't strike me off, one of my former colleagues wrote an article in the Times newspaper complaining that I hadn't been struck off. And then other of my colleagues have got taken to social media saying this is an outrage. What's the point of the General Teaching Council of Scotland if it can't even strike off Richard Lucas? And I found it real eye-opener, but I just said these are, these just people get on with it and work with it. Then you find out what's under the surface that could be a price to pay. Right, I want the last flat note. It's just a quick update on what's happening in Scotland on the abortion front. The Scottish Government has appointed an expert advisory group on abortion. They're stuffed it full of abortion activists and abortion service providers. And inevitably their advice is going to be to decriminalise abortion. I would bet my house on it, but that's what they're going to do. When this group was set up, they said this group is only looking at expansion and liberalisation. We will not even consider any restriction or anything going in the other direction. So they stated that. They then invited churches to give their opinion. How about that? How about it? Yeah, so they will recommend decriminalisation, but it probably won't come to the Parliament until after the Scottish election next year. Buffer zone law in Scotland passed by 100. One MSP voted against it. So it passed them like 123 to 1. And the one who voted against it has subsequently been chucked out of the SNP. He was an SNP MSP, and they have deselected him. He'll be retiring at the next election. So apart from him, they're all willing to either abstain or to vote for it. But these things, decriminalisation, buffer zones, their own goals. Their own goals. If I was a pro-abortionist and they asked me for my advice, I would say to them, just don't do anything. You've won. You have won. You've got your way. Abortion is happening on an industrial scale. We've got abortion on demand. It's fine. Just keep quiet and just let it continue. But they don't do it. They don't do it. They can't help trying to have a new battle to fight, trying to get a new victory, and they just keep prodding the issue. And what do they achieve? They just keep the issue on the agenda, on the national agenda, on the political agenda. And I think that suits us. That suits us. The last thing we want is settled, quiet, unchallenged evil. But every time an issue comes up, every time decriminalisation comes up, every time the buffer zones come up, what's it an opportunity for? It's an opportunity to speak about the value of every life. So that's our philosophy in the family party. Whatever the peripheral issue is, we want to use it as an opportunity just to get over every life is precious, etc. So their story and goal quite spectacular. Clearly, the pro-life argument of a lot of people is waiting to be won. It's not that people have heard it and thought, no, that's all rubbish. They've never heard the pro-life argument because the media works pretty hard to keep the debate on peripheral issues. As soon as it gets to the heart of the matter, well, they don't want that. They want to cut that out. So then the arguments are waiting to be won. I mean, I think Adam touched on this as well. There's a real challenge to the church as well, as it says in the Bible, is that the temptation of honouring the prophets of the past. When you preach a sermon, give examples of abolitionists and people who resisted the Nazis, all these people in the past, they're held up as heroes. When it comes to the issue in the present, well, they're not so keen. That's a bit more of a taboo. And I had the thought on the train. And I normally find, when I think I've thought something original, I normally realise within about 2 weeks. That's what everyone else is doing. But I was on the train, this thought occurred to me. That is it possible to believe that abortion involves the industrial scale killing of human beings and not be a pro-life activist? Because what you have to have in your head, you have to think, right, I know that what's going on is hundreds of thousands of human lives being ended, innocent human lives being ended, and I don't do anything about it. That's quite a cognitive dissonance, isn't it? So I think it's quite hard, quite difficult for people to hold the pro-life view if they're not doing anything about it. I think as soon as you've taken a step onto the streets with your CBR, whatever waistcoat on, and you've given the political sign, you've taken a stand, you've said something publicly, as soon as you've done that, then I think you're free in your mind to genuinely acknowledge for the horror that we're dealing with. But I think until people have taken that step, it's maybe quite difficult to actually acknowledge the seriousness of the issue. So I think part of helping people to understand the gravity of the issue is enabling them to express it in some way. I think those things go hand in hand. Now, again, on the train, I just thought I should tell this story just to finish. I heard this story ages ago, and it was told as a true story. And it was about an American missionary in India. And he spent, I don't know, 30 or 40 years preaching the gospel in India. He saw some results, nothing spectacular, but there were some results. And he wasn't a celebrity missionary. He was never invited to speak at big conferences or anything. But he was faithful, saw some fruit. At the end of his 40 years, he got on the liner. I mean, this is like century ago maybe. Got on the ocean liner to go back to America. And the liner docked. And he looks over the parapet on the boat, and there's a big crowd there cheering. And there's a brass band playing. And just for a moment, the thought went through his mind, oh, that's fantastic. People have got together, a crowd to welcome you home, and the brass band's playing. And it warmed his heart for a fraction of a second before he came to his senses and thought, this is not good. Then the word came round. Actually, the President of the United States was on the boat. And he'd been in India as well for 2 weeks, shooting tigers. And that was the reception he got. So the President got off, all the cheering, the band played, and then the band went off, the crowd disappeared, and then the rest of the passengers were allowed on. So he went off on his own with a suitcase, went to a little chibi hotel there before he travelled to his hometown in America. And he got on his knees and prayed. He said, God, how can this be fair? I've laboured my whole adult life in India, serving you, and there's no one to meet me. And he said, the president goes 2 weeks shooting tigers, and he gets that reaction when he comes home. And God said to him, you're not home yet.